Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next in our webinar series. I'm Andy Burnett. I'm one of the people who've been involved in facilitating the overall strategy development process. This webinar is going to give us an update on what's been happening since the Wallops Island workshop, and also talk about what we're going to be doing over the coming weeks and months. I want to pass over to Michael New just for a moment or two to set some context, and then we'll go through Frank and Eric and come back to Michael. So, Michael.
So, good afternoon, good morning. I don't think it's good evening for anybody, but if it is, good evening. So, what we're going to be talking about today is a recap, first, of how we got to where we are, and that Frank Rosenzweig is going to be doing for us. Then Eric Smith is going to be telling everybody a little bit about how we think the various concepts that came out of the Wallops workshop fit together. It's one way they could fit together. And then I'll tell you a little bit about where we're going from here. We basically had a big push up to the Wallops Island workshop, and now things have sort of trickled off for a while. But we're restarting now, and we're making another push now for putting this all together. So I thank everybody for their hard work leading up to this, and I thank you in advance for the hard work that you're going to be doing. And I turn it over to Frank, I guess, to tell us how we got where we are.
Very good. So, am I on now? Is that okay? Very good. All right. So I sort of humorously entitled my 15 minutes here as "Welcome to Our Worlds," and my task is to describe to you how we got to the point where we are now. That's going to be sort of part one of the process. And then part two, Eric Smith will talk in greater detail about some of the concept papers that have emerged out of the Wallops Island meeting, and then Michael will tell us about the road ahead. So let's see if I can manipulate this. All right, so what we're trying to do, and some of you may have been involved in this process who are joining us today, others may not, but we're creating the roadmap for the new Astrobiology strategic plan. And Michael and Mary Wojtek's goal, the NASA directorate, was seeking really to engage the whole astrobiology community rather than just a group to produce a successor to the current grant. So this is the agenda, to look at the process to date, talk about the concept documents, and highlight the next steps. So perhaps you got to this webinar today by clicking on the https astrobiologyfuture.org. This is, in fact, the gateway to the process. And so if you look down here, you can see click here to join discussion. I think that one thing that has been strongly encouraged by the NASA directorate from the get-go is that this is really a grassroots effort. So a bit of background: the exobiology program, as you may or may not know, has passed its 50th anniversary, and it grew over the years into the astrobiology program. This program aimed at understanding the origin, evolution, distribution, and future of life in the cosmos. So there were previous roadmaps that were created in 98 and 2003 with kind of a reality check in 2008. And that reality check resulted in a paper by Desmarais and Neuf et al. Published in Astrobiology. This was arrived at through a set of chaired workshops with writing assignments and results circulated. And this focus paper has really served many of us who are members of the astrobiology community in the preparation of our grants, for those of us who are submitting papers to the journal Astrobiology, we sort of have, or at least the people I know, have kept the goals and tasks that were described in the 2008 roadmap firmly in mind. And actually, I think it served a really good purpose in terms of letting people know exactly what NASA's mission is, the types of things that are funded, and the goals that we have as a community. So the process then was somewhat prescriptive, and it was essentially arrived at through the activities of a council of elders, if you will. The process now is aimed at creating another decadal roadmap, but the idea that NASA has now is to create this by grassroots means, to gain consensus, to be inspirational as well as aspirational. And this process has been facilitated by No Innovation, which is a facilitation group that had worked previously with the National Science Foundation and other groups. And I think one difference between then and now is that the technology that's available to do this kind of grassroots effort has advanced to a point where we can engage scores, if not hundreds, of individuals to come up with a new roadmap that's inclusive, that's been sparked by outside-the-box thinking, where you have user-generated groups, and we can go through this process of idea generation, idea consolidation, and winnowing of ideas electronically. And as I said, this has been facilitated by a professional outfit of which Andy Burnett is the CEO and founder. So the roadmap process until now, about a year ago, the directorate began to plan the activities associated with the road mapping process, and this was kicked off last spring with a set of 5 webinars that many of you who are in attendance today have participated in, either as discussants or as presenters. These webinars were 5, solar systems exploration, prebiotic evolution, evolution of advanced life, early evolution of life, and planetary conditions for life. So this occupied us during the month of May, and then the following, I'm going to click through the road mapping process and sort of illustrate what this part 1 of the process was. So in conjunction with No Innovation, a website was created. We've already flipped through that. That's a home for our virtual community. We had these webinars. Then that was followed by discussion in forums that went on for at least a week following each one of these webinars that was presented last May. And then a big question was picked for each topic area for web-based discussion on that alone. And then all of these activities were recorded and uploaded onto the astrobiologyfuture.org website, where the notes should be available to the community as a whole. So that's part 1. So what was how many people participated in this? There were almost 600 people from all over the world. 82 discussions followed these 5 initial webinars, hundreds of posts, 11 user-generated groups, and amazingly, the discussions were both collegial and insightful and sort of led us to part 2 of this process. So part 2 was the Wallops Island meeting And again, some of the discussants today were present at this meeting, and if you were, I hope you enjoy some of the pictures that Andy and his crew took. Michael and Mary invited over 100 researchers, all of the people who had participated in the webinars, people who had seriously and actively commented along the way, AI researchers, and they really tried not only to cast a wide net in terms of the interests that were represented, but also gender diversity, and also trying to bring on board not just the elders who would make up a council of elders, but rather mid-career as well as early career scientists. And of those people invited, over 50 came. There were a number who participated virtually throughout the Wallops Island meeting. And so what was the outcome? Well, the outcome of the process was 21 three-page concept documents. And these concept documents, as you will learn from Eric and Michael, are shortly to be made available online, and then will serve as the basis for additional discussion, hopefully consolidation, and I will steal no thunder from anyone. So the question then, how was this achieved? How did we get these concept documents? Well, I'd like to emphasize that there was a lot of hard work that was involved in the Wallops Island meeting. And in addition to hard work, there was some painful introspection. People that had I'm being a bit facetious here, but they had a very, very good time. It was quite an exciting meeting that took place in June over a 3-day period. So the process at Wallops Island was initially catalyzed by the No Innovation people posing a number of questions. And the questions were really the same question asked 3 different ways. One is, what is the title of a paper you'd like to publish 10 years from now? Or what is a question you'd like to see answered 10 years from now? Or what is the title of a seminar that you'd like to attend 10 years from now? And the sort of brainstorm 10-minute answers were put on Post-it notes, scores upon scores of these Post-it notes, because each person had the liberty to ask several of these questions. So you just do the math of 53 times 3 or 4. So we had lots of these Post-it notes. We tried to then group them by categories. And then, after having done that, the No Innovation people instructed us to form chains of interest. And basically, we were allowed to group as elephants on the move instead of trunk to tail, finger to arm, with the last person pointing to the particular topic. And these chains of interest then form the basis of working groups, and these working groups then set about consolidating these questions as much as possible, discussing them at length, and synthesizing these questions under these major themes. It was not one particular individual or set of individuals that formed these working groups. This was a very dynamic process, and people did a regular musical chairs according to their scientific interests. And then this was the result of this process. These working groups, in many places, confronted ignorance. So, for example, one group came up with this poster confronting our ignorance about life. Someone else asking specific questions and going through possible approaches. How did Earth obtain/retain habitability throughout its history? And then we had a set of impromptu poster sessions that were put together by these different working groups with multiple people in these working groups and participating in multiple working groups. So these poster sessions were run during the afternoon over the course of a couple of days, and then on the last day we have what I would term mini symposia, where the surviving ideas basically were discussed by the group as a whole, so all 53 people plus the 4 to 6 virtual participants sort of weighed in on these different proposals, these different questions and approaches, and then that served as the basis for generating the concept papers. So the next step then, so to summarize, we were charged with answering this question about what talk or seminar we would like to give or hear in the next 10 years. We put these ideas together en masse. Then we grouped them under broader concepts and described them in these one-page documents. And then, since the Wallops, Iowa meeting in June, these one-pagers have evolved into a set of 3-page concept documents. And so here is a low-resolution version of a image that you will see in the succeeding presentations by Eric Smith and Michael New. These are the concept papers, and of course you can't see anything in these ovals and rectangles, but that will become better resolved in the next half an hour or so. So, in summary then, this is a community effort. The community is continuing to recruit new members even as the road mapping process is underway. Please encourage your colleagues who you think would have something interesting, some insights into the process to weigh in the next steps. Simply because you haven't been a part of the process up until now does not mean that you cannot join the show for the next several months. So that concludes my presentation of the road mapping process and how we actually got to this point. And then Eric Smith from George Mason University will be next. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you, Frank. And let me just chip in briefly, particularly for people who might be watching this after the event. If you're not registered on the site, or if you're registered and you're having any kind of technical problems, such as you can't remember your password or anything like that, please do click on the support tab and we will sort out any problems that you're having, because it's really important that you do register so you can be part of the conversation and the threads that emerge. So, with that, Eric.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Hello, everybody. The part of this that I'm supposed to cover is the combination of the concept documents, which I'll probably also slip and refer to as white papers, and the network diagram that Frank just showed you, as a kind of interface between what's been done up to this time and the next stage of the planning. So this is kind of a snapshot of where we are now. What you see in front of you right now is the blackboard where the No Innovation guys had us, or they produced these blue Post-its, each one of which corresponded roughly to one of the white papers that had been sketched or drafted at that time. And then the group was instructed to go to the whiteboard and put things that had some relation to each other in proximity and indicate where there seemed to be network relations among them. Then beyond that, further comments were added in various little yellow stickies. So, for instance, you may not be able to see, we'll make this available in more resolution. This biosign for biosignatures seems to have peppered the graph. Biosignatures seem to be a common theme in everything. And you see that there was also some enthusiasm for links, that these ideas had something to do with each other. So the reason this was done is that the concept documents needed to be narrow enough that a coherent narrative could be spun around them. That means at some level they needed to be what people know how to do now and what they think can be put forward as a plausible and possibly feasible research project on the time frame of 10 years. That doesn't mean that they capture everything about the scope of ideas people had in mind. So the blackboard, sort of the proximity diagram, putting things in the same place and then indicating where there were explicit links, was an attempt to make it material that these concept documents exist in the context of both larger themes and larger communities. So, Michael, this is the way the concept documents were related at the end of the meeting. I'll move next to a graph which is a cleaned up version of this. This is a snapshot of where they were at end June. They've continued to change slightly. There's been some merger of topics. People who were not able to be present in person have added a couple of documents. And Michael will show you how the network has been modified slightly since that time. I'm going to refer to the June slot, and I'll move you to this network, and we'll zoom in a little bit. You won't be able to see all of this in full resolution, but maybe you'll get enough to understand roughly what was there. As the white papers roll out and you get to see the content, at the end of each of them is the writer's own idea of which other documents are linked. So there are multiple representations of network connectivity that will be available as part of the content coming out of the meeting. So let me zoom in a little bit and I'll kind of pan around. I'll zoom out first. Yikes. So this is kind of the scope of the whole network. You can see that there are two or three perhaps main theme areas that are kind of connected components. I'll zoom in and I'll pan around a little bit to give you an idea what those were. There's a kind of a big cluster here that has to do with the sequence from prebiotic to biotic chemistry. That starts out on the top with consideration of astrophysical, atmospheric, or planetary, or other body synthesis of small organics. There's a cluster of papers in here that discuss what I would call the rise of hierarchical complexity and the functions associated with it. All of this goes to a sort of emphasis on what can be done with reductive or synthetic methods, so getting at a notion of what's the minimum to be alive. Feeding into that, there was a thread on what we can do with historical reconstruction, how much we can understand about minimality and retrace toward Aboriginal forms. This will connect through the ubiquitous biosignatures stickies to an explicit paper on biosignatures. Now coming to a completely different thread, the previous thread was basically chemistry and synthesis. There's another collection up here. There's the sort of broad theme that participants chose here could be called complexification of the systems that come out of these components. There's a cluster up here that's sort of explicitly biological. Can we talk about what are the rules of biogenesis? What are the conditions for a thing to be alive? Is there a typology of biospheres that generalizes from the one that we know? What do we know conceptually about the nature of evolutionary dynamics that tells us, what we're looking for as the outcome of this process? This all kind of feeds in. There was a very healthy awareness that the biosphere needs to be understood as a component within an ongoing planetary dynamic process. So there was discussion of the evolutionary dynamics, not in a biological sense, but just in the sense of unfolding of complexity of the planet, both before and with the biosphere, and also looking toward the future. Coming over to the side, we talk about generalization from the life we know. So there's a discussion of the formation of planets that are habitable or inhabited. There were discussions of the criteria and also the techniques for exploration, and then particularly what to look for in planets outside Earth or outside the solar system. So let me try to convey to you the sorts of things that we hope the concept documents and the network representation of them are meant to provide as an interface for discussion. First, questions to the community. As you read through these and as you look, is the research that you care about represented, either within the scope of one of the concept documents, or if not within a concept document, at least within one of these network clusters, so that there are things in proximity to it. If what you care about is not well represented, what needs to be added, either by central theme or possibly a whole area that's underrepresented. The proximity here doesn't only represent themes, it also represents communities of people who should be in contact with each other. The meeting was pretty diverse and deep in a surprisingly eclectic set of domains, but it was a modest-sized sample from a large community. Are there other people we need to seek out? Are there people who don't even think of themselves as having content relative to this who need to be solicited? The concept documents will be rolled out. There will be webinars and discussions associated with each of them, and then periods of content and methods for revision. There's also been some possibility of putting the network itself out so that other comments on different arrangements, different types of relations or linkages can also be collected. So what does the directorate wish to accomplish with this? A theme that has been reiterated in both internal meetings and also the things that we were told at the conference is this roadmap is meant to inspire ideas and not just to list the ideas people already have. So there's a healthy tension here between sort of explaining what we understand now and what we think we can do in 10 years, but also allowing the roadmap to set long-range vision and to teach us to ask the questions that will give greater depth than just sort of the projects that are within easy reach. Here I'll interject a personal opinion. Astrobiology is naturally a very multidisciplinary field. The emergence of life is a process in physical chemistry in a planetary context, possibly a larger spatial context, that led to all of the things that make up biology. That means that it has meaningful content with a very large number of essential and basic scientific fields. We can be exposing frontiers in those fields, and that seems a very healthy role for astrobiology as a community. We can also think about seeding collaborations. It's natural in the course of practical work to need certain things. You need simplification if you're in the synthesis or the analysis business, but if you're trying to reconstruct planetary histories, they may tell you that more than a certain degree of simplicity is not realistic. To what extent can these sort of conflicting needs be brought into a productive contact, and how much will they teach us how to ask the technical questions that we don't know how to ask currently? So that's another kind of relationship that the network can stand for if we use it well. So I was encouraged to sort of put out my own views for things that can be done, not because they're special, but to just kind of give an idea of what the roadmap can provide an interface for doing, what the network can provide an interface for doing. First of all, there's not just one network. There are many networks as viewed by many different people and communities. We're not limited to paper anymore. We have computers. We can keep all of this. We can try to do statistics on it to find out who's out and who cares about what. As you read the position papers, I hope that you will be impressed with the amazing amount of topical depth that's in them. My experience in this community doesn't go far enough back to know what was present in informal discussion 10 or 20 years ago, but I was amazed at the range of thoughtful questions that are contained in this. Even so, there are certain things that perhaps have been opened in this discussion that we want to amplify or that we want to make real priorities, or possibly other things that we think can be solicited beyond what's been done. So, I'm painfully aware of how little of what's in this network I have any ability to understand or to speak to. So this will reflect the areas where I have some exposure, and the hope is that the community will fill this out with everything we want in it. So first, what collaborations have already been opened but maybe can be strengthened? I was impressed with the webinars running up to the meeting, and even more with what's in the concept documents, that there seems to be a change in the discussion in this cycle from what I have seen in previous discussions in literature. There's much more consideration of molecular heterogeneity. We have some experience with individual molecule classes, but people are now trying to seriously figure out what happens when you can't exclude any molecule class and you have to deal with all of them. there's much more sense that ecosystems can control dynamics and that we may not always want to use the organism or the species as a model for evolution, but instead we want to understand what types of dynamics are inherent in the ecosystem. Overall, there seems to have been a tendency in these discussions to think about heterogeneous systems with lots of small and sometimes ad hoc recruited components that wind up generating a robust structure. This seems to me extremely healthy and very exciting. It also seems to me like the kind of discussions that systems biology has been led into. We once had a simple view of RNA. We now realize that all living systems are RNA-regulated machines in which DNA and proteins have sort of specialized roles. Can we tie into that discussion better? Macroecology is recognizing the dynamics of ecosystems, and of course in evolutionary biology there's a wealth of thinking about structure and the way structure is used to create whole domains of dynamics. Those seem to be communities with which collaboration is very natural and a good thing to develop. That's in the documents already. It's a thing we can think about whether we want to even more actively solicit. Another thing that I thought was great in going through in this cycle, there are naive views of Darwinian dynamics which sort of take individuality for granted as the platform on which competition and replication and selection occur. But there's also the awareness that individuality is a complicated notion that's constructive and that has to be understood. That's actually been discussed. This is a thing that's starting to flower in evolution of development and in sort of a bigger merger of ecology, evolution, and development. And somewhere in here in the middle of the graph, I would say this thing that has been tongue-in-cheek called Geo, Eco, Evo, Devo, recognizing that life is also part of a planetary process. That's kind of a center of mass that links several different white papers in this area. That's another thing that personally I have a lot of enthusiasm for. Areas that I think, good as it was, the meeting did not yet plumb as fully as it might. I think in chemistry and molecular biology, we're seeing sort of cut from the whole cloth, very sophisticated characterization of the kinds of dynamical order that can form in complex state spaces that involve chemical complexity in organic chemistry, in mineralogy, and then the heterogeneous components that wind up making up cellular systems. Now, in parallel with this, and not in much contact with it, non-equilibrium statistical mechanics has been making great strides in actually clarifying the concepts for what non-equilibrium order means. Interestingly enough, most of that work that's devoted to concepts has used systems with relatively simple low-level microstructure. Seems to me that astrobiology is the fertile ground for bringing in the problem of dynamical order in non-equilibrium statistical mechanics when the basic state space is complicated. So that's a conversation I would love to see opened. There are people in the community doing this already. It does not seem to me that it's presently a front and center awareness within physics. Maybe we could make it one. Another thing that was discussed that you can see on the previous slide, there's always the question of what's the appropriate role of theory. You know, every biologist can give you an example where theoreticians had grand aims and then didn't do a very good job dealing with the complexity of mechanism. And as a result of that, the role of theory has kind of been attenuated in a lot of these discussions. But we're getting to the point where system characterization is sophisticated enough and rich enough that we have good descriptions of mechanism and also of the concepts that are coming out. And now we're starting to face the problem of navigating this complexity. Perhaps that defines one role for theory, probably not the only one. Maybe the theory we need will be different from what has existed in the past. I'm enthusiastic for a larger role for computation as its own scientific discipline. Complexity of algorithms, what's solvable, what's not solvable, as a part in this discussion. So that's a community that I would have enthusiasm for bringing in and engaging as the discussion goes on. So at this point, let me turn it over to Michael to tell you where we're going and also update beyond what I could show you as of the end of June. Thanks.
Actually, Michael, may I just interject for a moment because of a couple of questions that are being asked in the chat room. Just to be clear, the slide packs for all three presenters are now on the front page. They're linked on the front page of the website. And each of the slide packs has part of a discussion thread. Now, particularly with the presentation that Eric has just given, we'd asked him to give an overview of the way the network came together. And I just wanted to make clear, we're not in any way asking him to defend any particular structure within the network. He is a participant in it and has interested views, but I encourage everyone, both the people who were at Wallops and were involved in making the network, and anyone else who's looking at it now, to sort of get involved in the discussion. I'm sure Eric will join in on that, but it's not his network, and I just wanted to make sure everyone is clear on that. Also, for people who are adding comments in the chat window, that's great. And if you could start the threads on the website as well, that will probably give us a great way to involve a wider range of the community. And with that, Michael.
So somewhere I should have some slides, somewhere?
Somewhere there will be some slides. Mike, can you find the slides?
I actually didn't receive those. I'm sorry about that. Can you share your screen, Michael?
Yeah, I can share my screen. Hang on. Can everybody see that now?
Yep, that's good.
Great. So I can't see the chat window really too well, so if somebody has a question, somebody else is going to have to tell me that they have a question.
We can relay it to you.
Thank you. So I'm here to wrap it up and say where we're going to from here and how we're going to get there. First, I really want to thank Frank and Eric for presenting today. They didn't have to do it. We asked them, and they did a great job, and it was from really the goodness of their hearts to do this. And I really do thank them for doing a wonderful job. So the way forward. So now we've got a set of concept documents. It covers some, hopefully much, of astrobiology, and we'd like to bring the broad community back into the discussion. So each document is going to be the focus of a single hour-long webinar given by some of the original authors to convey to the community what they were thinking. Then on the Monday before their webinars, the webinars are going to be on Wednesdays and Thursdays. On that Monday before, we will open up the documents for reading and comments. And these are comments, not edits. Only the individuals listed as authors will be able to edit the documents, but everybody can put a comment in. Authors will be able to resolve comments. This is the language of Google Docs, which we're using. And of course, existing authors can invite other individuals to become new authors. I encourage everybody, before they start commenting, to please go online and read the guidelines for commenters. We've written these to sort of control the process a little bit, but not too much. The key guidelines are we would prefer if comments are not anonymous. We'd like you to log in to Google as yourself. We'd like you to encourage you that the comments should be on the point and created with the thought of improving the document, not just throwing some brickbats. Comments can be of any length. From our point of view, Google Docs has its own view of that and basically limits a comment to 2,048 characters, including spaces. So if your comment is longer than that, create a new Google Doc, give it a name, and refer to it in the comment in the original document. I really hope that everybody who chooses to comment will challenge the assumptions and the conclusions of these documents in a professional manner. When you start making comments, please include relevant citations, because we're ultimately, in the final document, we're going to have them. And if you've got some issue or issues that are just too large to be easily contained in a set of comments, feel free to contact the authors directly and enter into a conversation with them. All comments should be written using standard American English grammar and spelling. This is just a matter for consistency of usage. And finally, something that I take very seriously is that comments that personally disparage an author or any of the referenced researchers in that paper, they'll be deleted. And any commenter who displays a pattern of this type of behavior will be banned. So far, everybody's been very collegial, and I really appreciate that. and I'd like it to remain that way. So we've scheduled the first four...
Michael, we do have one question about comments.
Oh, yes.
To not put an anonymous comment, one needs a Google account,
yes,
right?
Yes, correct.
But not necessarily a Gmail address.
Not necessarily a Gmail address. It'll come with one, but you need a Google account.
You need a Google account, yeah. So, yes, I'm somehow putting money in Google's pocket, and I apologize for that. But they got a lot of money already. So, thanks to Lindsay Hayes, we've scheduled up the first 14 webinars, and I'm not going to read them all, but basically starting next week and running through early November. The titles of the documents to be discussed are in this set of slides, and they're on the website. And so it's starting off next week with two of them. The first about how does the evolution of the atmosphere and its interaction with the solid Earth and the biosphere inform our exploration of habitable worlds. And the second one will be on the 26th, is what are the sources of organic monomers relevant to the origin of life? And then there's a whole list of 12 more. And I encourage everybody who's interested to come listen to them, then comment and discuss on them. So after the webinars, what happens? So, assuming approximate dates, this process of webinars and community reading and community commenting will extend to early, mid-January of 2014. For about a month thereafter, the author groups are going to meet either in person or virtually, and they're going to adjudicate the different comments and polish up their writing. Around that time, we're also going to engage the services of a professional technical editor, so that whatever final document we produce actually will look professional. End of February, we're planning on having another face-to-face workshop that will integrate all the papers and produce a more or less, and I emphasize the more or less, coherent document. And about a couple weeks after that, we will have hopefully a first draft ready for review by any and all. We are planning right now on definitely having the Planetary Science Subcommittee of the NASA Advisory Council provide a formal review, and we are exploring other options for other formal reviews. Our target is middle of April of 2014 to have a final draft ready for publication.
There's one more of a comment than a question. It would be good to create a Google Calendar with all the webinars and meetings. It can then be easily imported on personal accounts.
Good idea. We will take care of that.
Yep.
So this is another version of the network diagram that Eric so eloquently spoke about. This is where it stood back in June, and since we've started talking with the author groups, we've had a couple of small changes that have happened. The changes are essentially in green here, so if I flick back and forth, can you see my cursor at all? Or no?
I can see your cursor.
Okay. Yeah. So these two papers down here that essentially were about two different approaches to minimal life, either building it from the ground up synthetically or reductively by throwing out things from modern life, have become combined into simply what does the simplest life look like. Sorry. Up here, what genomic, metabolic, and ecological features characterize LUCA being the last universal common ancestor, and then what genomic, metabolic, and ecological features characterize life at the root of the tree of life. Well, the root of the tree of life is by definition, in some sense, LUCA, so they've gotten combined into what genomic, metabolic, and ecological features characterize LUCA. Up here in this area, some of these papers and concepts have gotten combined together. The other big area where we've had a lot of changes is out here in what I call the formation of habitability, and Eric had a much better term for it. But basically, there's a dual dichotomy up here of papers having to do with in our solar system versus outside of our solar system, whether a planet or environment is habitable or actually inhabited. And rather than have multiple papers covering this, we decided to combine some papers. So we now have how do we find and remotely identify habitable or inhabited planets around other stars, which is the extrasolar question. how would we search for life on other worlds in our solar system, which is the inhabited in our solar system, and then how can we identify habitable environments in our solar system. So those bunch of papers kind of got collapsed. There's also a new one on did life or prebiotic chemistry evolve on differentiated icy worlds. And finally, what is the geophysical evolutionary history of terrestrial planets of different sizes and compositions? This is a new one that's been suggested to us as a gap, essentially about terrestrial planets and how do they get the way they are, since those are the ones we know for life. This is where it is today. If you come back and look at this diagram in a week or two, it could very well be different. We are going to come up with a facility for the community to modify this diagram and save their own versions, but we're not there yet. Mostly because we really want people to focus on the documents and not on the bright, shiny new tool of, oh, I can change this network around. So that's pretty much where I'm done. I am happy to answer any questions by chat or by email or any which way. So that's it for me.
So just while we're waiting for people to have a chance to ask questions on that, let me elaborate slightly on the commenting process. So first of all, we're going to run the first few concept papers through a fairly simple process, which is they will be available at the beginning of the week they're presenting on, although if you go to the website now, you'll actually see that that 3 of them are there too, but they're available in read-only mode. So the basic process we're going to try is the papers will be there in read-only mode. After the webinar, it then switches to comment mode, so after you've had a chance to listen to what people are saying, and we'll encourage you to comment them. What we don't know is whether the Google commenting system will be effective enough to allow the authors and the rest of the community to really understand the comments and to engage in that discussion, or whether it will look like an explosion in a post-it note factory where there are comments everywhere and it's difficult to follow. So we're going to try the simplest possible approach first. If that proves to be difficult, or if the community come back and say, actually, the conversations that we want to have need to be more expansive and threaded than this, then we will associate each paper with a discussion thread on the website. The only downside to that is it becomes harder for the authors to track back the comment that you're making in a discussion thread with the specific elements that they're writing. So we're going to take the simplest possible approach first and see how that works. So basic approach, prior to the webinar, you'll be able to read. Post the webinar, you'll be able to comment, and if necessary, we'll set up a thread. There is also the discussion thread, particularly for the concept diagram, the spider diagram, which Eric showed, and that might be a good place if you want to talk about aspects that you feel are missing from it or alternative ways of structuring it. That's already there, so by all means add to that discussion thread. So, Michael, there are the questions. We've got one from Aaron on here. If we can respond to that.
Sure. So Aaron Noel asked, one thing that was in the chat rooms but not mentioned here are documents about missions and or technology development priorities or desires. Has this been deliberately left out? And the short answer that I was typing to Aaron is, yeah, we have deliberately left this out. This ultimate document is intended to be a science strategy as opposed to an actual implementation document that says, do these missions, develop this instrument, build this technology. Why? Because, as we've seen recently, implementation documents about missions and instruments and technologies are very, very dependent on budget. And if the budget changes suddenly, then all of a sudden we're holding a document that says do X, Y, and Z, and we have the money to do none of the above, or one of the above.
Or half of the above.
Or half of the above. And that's not a good document that's going to live very long, and we want this document to live for at least a decade. So Mary and I decided that this will be a science strategy. What are the big science questions? How do they interrelate? And if we need to start doing mission planning or technology prioritizations, we will then use that science strategy to spin up a group that will then take that and turn that into a set of priorities, or turn it into a roadmap for build this, then build that, then build the other thing. So that's the answer to that question.
And while a couple of other people are typing there by the looks of it, let me just remind you that if you want to actually ask a question and talk, all you have to do is click the button at the top part of your screen over here with the little hand, and Mike will open up the audio line for you, just in case anyone prefers to do that rather than type. Although there is something of a sort of old-fashioned movie quality to this. It's a bit like watching the ticker tape come out as you see people are typing. And you go, the treasure is buried in, we lost the connection. Right.
Well, I actually was just thinking about how I missed the old days of chat windows where you'd actually see each letter coming up and then type the typo and then the coming back and then fixing it. Top 5. So Aaron has asked, maybe not in this round, but he would like to see a realistic but not explicitly cost-constrained top 5 wish list of astrobiology specific missions. It could be fun. Yeah. You can definitely try to do that over beers one night.
Can have community-wide voting on that as well.
The beer or the mission?
2 separate votes, I suspect.
Yeah, I think, Yeah, we'd love to hear your voices, so, please think about raising your hand and talking rather than letting your fingers do the walking. The old days of chat. Fabia has asked a question or comment. It seems to me that other people who would be precious to shape astrobiology in the future are those involved in information management, database creation, etc. With the huge amount of interdisciplinary information that astrobiology creates, we need new ways to access it and make it available to the scientific community and the public. Is this a subject that has been discussed? I don't know if it's been discussed in this activity. It is an issue that's near and dear to my heart and to Mary Wojtek's, and we are, once this science strategy gets put to bed and then the new competition for membership in the Astrobiology Institute gets completed, very high on our list of things to do will be actually that discussion about the kinds of databases and data management systems that astrobiology needs. This is also an ongoing conversation in other parts of the scientific world because we have geochemistry databases like PicoDemo. We have molecular biology databases like the PDB. We have other databases for other kinds of information, but we have no database system or even approach that links geochemistry, biology, paleontology, links them all together in one way. And so that's definitely something that astrobiology probably needs right now, and something that Mary and I are going to be working on. So stay tuned. Welcome.
Okay, last 2 or 3 minutes of our current session. If anyone wants to type a question, or if anyone wants us to unmute the phone line and you actually ask a question, obviously you can carry on the discussions on the website, and there is a home for each of these, particularly, say, if it relates to Michael's presentation, then you can just tack your question onto the discussion thread there. Apart from that, I think we're probably done at this stage. So thank you very much to our presenters. Our next sessions will be Wednesday and Thursday of next week, and that, assuming it's going to work for everyone's calendars, those will be the days that we'll be using every week for these slots. We will sort out a calendar that you can import, and also all of the dates will be published on the Astrobiology website, along with the dial-in information. That, I think, is about it. So, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you online in the near future. All right, cheerio. Bye.